Okay, good Friday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever the heck you find yourself. We're just going to get started here and let some people come in. And while people are coming into the room, Natalie and Rebecca, I'm hoping you can just introduce yourselves a bit.
Rebecca, you
Natalie, do you
go.
want to go first?
Oh, I'll go
Oh, you want
first.
me to go
Okay.
first?
I'll
Rebecca,
go
you go.
first. I'll go first. I'll keep it brief. My name is Rebecca Katz, and I am a culinary translator slash nutritionist slash chef, cookbook author, and painter.
It's a good list.
And I'm Natalie Crittendon. I am a psychosocial occupational therapist. I serve as a counselor on the team at Mettle Health.
Great. Thank you both so much. I realize Rebecca, after we talked, I actually changed the title of this presentation to Food and Nourishment. And I just realized that I didn't use the most updated slide deck for this. So it says Food and Nutrition. But after we spoke, I wanted to change it to Nourishment based on what you were saying. So I just want to call that out for now.
Great.
So Rebecca and Natalie are going to go through some just kind of level setting topics around food and meals and eating and symptoms. And once they get through those, you have two ways of asking questions and interacting with us. And we love that. That's where the good stuff happens. So you can click the raise hand button and you can speak with Rebecca and Natalie and ask your question. And if you'd prefer not to speak out loud, you can type it into the Q&A and I will ask it aloud for you. So two options for you after we get through the slides. The chat should be open for everyone. So if you hear anything that just kind of resonates with you and you want to comment on it, please do. And we will get started here. Thank you so much for being with us.
Okay, this first gorgeous slide that we have with the brief title, Just to Spark Rebecca's Genius and Sharing is Nourishment in the Now. And Rebecca, will you start to gift us with your information, insight, and knowledge, please?
Thank you, Natalie. I love talking about this topic of nourishment. Well, first of all, I love this Wayne Thiebaud painting. I want to dive into this cake. But nourishment is a little bit different than nutrition. I think we tend to think of nutrition as things that we should have. And it can be a little bit restrictive in this day and age in our kind of diet culture. And I think nourishment is something that is more about feeling like you're eating and feeling nourished from the inside out. So a nourishment can take the form in the culinary nourishment can take on many forms. So maybe it is eating something that just is super healthy, that you feel really good about, or it could be a potato chip. I think nourishment depends on where you are and what's going on in your life and where you are in your process. Nourishment, if you're training for a marathon, may take on a different look than day-to-day nourishment or nourishment at the end of life. So nourishment takes on many forms, but the bottom line is that whatever it is that makes you feel good about what it is that you're eating, or what I like to call the power of yum, something that just gives you that involuntary spasm of vocal delight where you just feel it deep in your bones. That to me is the most important thing. And I do know people who can eat super quote unquote healthy, but don't feel nourished by it. So I think nourishment tends to be not defined from the outside, but defined from the inside.
When you were talking just now, I was recalling how recently I've discovered that some mornings I wake up and I open the fridge and I think, okay, I'm going to do my usual breakfast. But some mornings I want to get out the jar of olives and have a bunch of olives in the morning. And I've discovered that it seems to relate to curbing or moving towards a migraine, and that my body has been saying, hit salt super hard, don't do your usual breakfast. And so that's when you talk about what's on the inside. I'm not sure anyone has ever told me, a great way to start your day is having a bunch of olives, and that would be healthy or nutritious, but it feels so nourishing to me. There's something that happens and it's like, oh, I just really need to have like 8 or 9 olives, huge olives. And so
Yeah.
speaking to the nourishing, it's like, that's what feels good inside. And I think I'm okay with doing it, right?
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, do you remember, like, first of all, when people used to say that breakfast was the most important meal of the day,
Yes.
right? And it's actually a very genetic thing, whether you're like a real breakfast eater, or like some people really need to eat as soon as they wake up. And some people really don't want to eat as soon as they wake up. They need a little bit more time. And I never was like a major breakfast eater, but breakfast was always like a sweet affair, right? It was like cereal, it was toast and jam or pancakes or whatever. And not a breakfast eater, I don't really get hungry until later in the morning. I was always a savory girl. So to me, right, those olives sound like right on point for me, right? But I think what you're saying is that there are no rules here. And when you tune in to what it is that your body is telling you that you might need, even if you don't even consciously know, right? But you just felt gravitated to something savory and salty for a good reason, right? And you don't need an MBA, I mean, master's in nutrition to know that, but you gravitated to that, and that was what nourished you. And this is exactly what it is that yeah, I'm trying to illustrate here. It's very personal. And I think, we, again, we're a little bit dogmatic in this country about what we should and should not have or eat, or, we can be, everybody's got their lane, but it really is a personalized thing. And I think it's helpful to know that and to respect it.
Sonia, let's go to the next slide. Does that sound okay, Rebecca?
Yes.
Okay. Ooh, okay. This is a little bit of what's in the mix for me too. Like, oh, if I can take care of myself, if the olives are going to help, then maybe I won't get this migraine. But if it can help, if I can feel calmer, then I'm not going to have this tear my day apart.
Right. Right. Well, food is an emotional issue, period. End of story. I mean, and I grew up with this at our dinner table. My father was like, eat, then worry. Eat, then we'll talk about it, right? I mean, it was like, and he was like, food was an emotional thing. And but in the best way for him, and he shared that, like, this love of eating without judgment, right? And he was the best person to cook for because he truly was an appreciative eater. So, and every cook loves an appreciative eater, but I do think that food, the emotional aspects of food, are really important. And I want to address how that might manifest itself in different stages of life. But I want to start, well, first of all, at the beginning of life, it truly is emotional. And, you know, that baby is going to cry to be fed. That's like a pure, you know, emotional. Then, you know, you get to be a toddler, let's say, and you really want something and you want it bad, and you're going to do whatever you can to get it, even if your parent says no, right? There will be no popsicle right before dinner, right? But you're going to go for it, right? Then food might become an emotional trigger, let's say later in your life or in your teens or adolescence, or, you know, in a different stage of your life where you might be stuffing down feelings and you use food to do that. Food may be an emotional issue because it brings back a memory. And that is where I'd like to focus, right? Because food is a full-on sensory experience. It brings everything, you know, a sense of smell, a sense of touch, a sense of taste, a memory of where we were when we ate something, you know. All of those things are so important. They bring the food to life. And I think towards the end of life, that is a really important consideration, is thinking about the foods that bring us joy or trigger a really wonderful memory. And that's not something that's, again, really talked about or touched on in, like, you know, when you necessarily meet with a nutritionist who's trying really hard to make sure that you get X amount of nutrients to keep you strong. But I'm coming at it from a place of nourishment, and that there is no such thing as quote unquote perfect. And if you are at if you're dealing with an illness and you're kind of maybe limited on how much you can eat at any one time, I think it's important, you know, to honor those foods that bring up an emotional response or something that you might, you know, really be craving. And Natalie, I think I shared this story with you, and I'm going to share it again. How I've worked with some people at the end of life that have memories and cravings. And this one person who was a really great cook, just like, he had a way of making pork chops, and he had a way of making ribs, and he had this craving for them. And I suggested, when I was talking to him, how could you maybe have a little bit of a taste of that? Maybe it's not going to be this whole platter of something, but maybe it's going to be a friend that makes you something like that. And maybe you're going to smell it and look at it, and maybe you're going to have a little bit of a morsel or a taste, a little bite, so that you can have that. Or maybe it's, you know, the person that just wants that morsel of the chocolate, a really great chocolate melting in her mouth, you know. So food is an emotional issue. It can, and there's a place for that. And it's a place to be honored, because food is a part of our memories. It's a part of our history. And it's a part of what, it's just a part of life. It can't be separated. So Natalie, I would love your take on that, because I know you've got some interesting things to say.
I mean, I think so many of us can relate to everything that you said. And for me, the truth naming around it all, and actually that we all share this and have this in common, it's a unifying experience, I think, and imagine across the world and all continents. And the naming of the stages and how it starts from infancy through toddlerhood and adolescence and into adulthood, later adulthood, or any point when our dying process starts, that this exists is a unifying reality that I really, really appreciate, and am enjoying the opportunity to honor that this is alive for all of us.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's important for all of us to embrace it, because it's such a part of life, in all stages.
Let's
What's
go.
next?
Yeah, show us, Sonia. Oh, yeah.
Oh, this is the topic. You need to start on this one.
I needed to head this
This
one
is,
up. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
This is perfect, because when Rebecca and I were talking, the example that she just gave around a morsel of something that is so enjoyed. When we met last week, I got ranting about this idea that in our Western healthcare system, and I will say that, I work within the healthcare system and I'm an occupational therapist. I am defined as being on rehabilitative services. That so much of the focus and goal when we are interfacing with the healthcare system is to rehabilitate. And if a lot of the narratives can include, well, if I could get back to, or we're going to try to get you back to, or there's this return to this state that at one point was how we existed in the world. And now we've changed and we're different. And so in terms of food, I think about, I want to get back to being able to eat that, or that amount, or that type of food, or that texture, or the quantity, or from whatever food category that might be, fibrous or meat or whatever. When so often we're interested in, or can become really focused on, or even obsessed with this returning our bodies to a past state, when really, can we explore, have curiosity and openness to modifying? And with food, it might not be how we used to do it, even at the table or in a certain chair or with certain people. How do we modify instead of returning to? And how can we include that in the realm of nourishment and food and the ritual of it all?
Well, it's like when you touched on this was like, oh, yes, right? So I'm just going to chime in and say that modification is the key. And I think it's really important for caregivers to understand this, okay? Because, our natural inclination when somebody is sick is to want to feed them. And to, food is a way that, it's something that's in our control, right? So when we kind of feel out of control, we feel like, you know what? I know I could cook for this person. And I had dealt with this firsthand. So on numerous levels, both personally and professionally. So I can really speak to this. What we as caregivers might have in our head as something that would be really good for that person, which is maybe more rehabilitative, is not always the right culinary RX. And sometimes, right? And oftentimes less is actually more. So, the temptation is, I'm going to make this soup and I'm going to serve it in this big bowl. And, and and I'm going to, serve it to my loved one, and I'm going to watch them eat the whole thing. And it's going to make them better. Right. And yet that person may be having transient taste changes, or just no appetite, or the appetite center might be totally off. And just the notion of dealing with this big bowl is overwhelming. And so what happens is, the bowl gets pushed aside, and they can't even take a bite. But another way to maybe serve that soup is to say, you know what? It's not how much somebody is eating. It may be just a small amount. I'm going to put this soup in like a little shot glass, or a little small, beautiful bowl, right? And maybe there's only going to be a quarter of a cup in there, and that is more manageable. That is meeting maybe somebody more of where they're at. So, and then somebody can always come back for more, but it's that initial kind of like going back to where your loved one was, right, in the old days. But we're moving forward now, and it might look different. So how we cook for somebody, or how we feed somebody, or our expectations of what we can and cannot eat have to be modified. They can't go backwards. They have to go forwards.
It also makes me think about when I've been in caregiving roles like that, the amount of times that I wasn't able to recognize that I need you to eat this because that will make me feel better.
Oh, amen. I've been there. Right?
I'm not sure it actually changed anything for them, but it was to put me at ease.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I could give you so many examples, where I have just missed the mark so bad. I mean, the bullseye. And what's so ironic is that I've been doing this for so long, cooking for people who are going through transitions and through illness, right? And yet with my loved ones, I just totally missed the mark. Yeah. And so it's so humbling, right? It's like, oh, here I am. I showed up to the party.
It's hard for all of us to modify everyone that's in the picture.
Yeah, it really is. It's very humbling. It's very humbling. It really gets to that really deep core of really just so wanting to have some semblance of control when you're not in control. And the act of cooking has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? So that act of cooking is empowering. And then we put our own, will on top of that. And yeah, we can overshoot a bit. So yeah, I think sometimes when we're dealing with people who are going through illness or end of life, the rule is less is more, right? And that you can always give them another little dollop or another little bite, right? It's easier to do that than it is to, confront somebody with the whole plate.
I even remember hearing a story about someone having gone to a restaurant and they felt healthy. Doctors say they're healthy. They're living an active life. And they went to this restaurant and the plate showed up and it was just huge and it was filled with a ton of food. And the person said, I couldn't even touch it. I was so overwhelmed by the amount of food on there. It was like not appetizing. So even noticing the time of feeling good, what that's like, that it can be an experience of overwhelm.
Oh, and I am with you. I mean, I have had those experiences where, I've been out, like a restaurant, places that really ought to know better. And the plate just comes and it's like overwhelming. I don't even know where to begin. And I'm just like, oh no, I'm so not there, whereas when you go and the plate looks beautiful, and I'm not talking about like Michelin star beautiful, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's just the right amount. The colors look right. There's just an appetizing feel about it. And you just, it ignites your appetite center, right?
Uh-huh.
Whereas if you pile too much on, it depresses your appetite center. And that's whether you're healthy or you're not healthy. That's just, those rules apply.
Okay, let's see what we have next. This is you, Rebecca. This is all
okay,
you.
so we're going to talk about the power of yum here. So again, doesn't matter where you are in your life, right? There is the biggest issue about nourishment and feeling nourished is taste and texture. So I want to deal with that first, and then I'm going to talk about how that can relate to how we modify taste to mitigate symptoms. Okay. So when you are eating food, there is what I call the yum button. Okay. And the yum button is, I'm going to show you, is right at the top of the palate. Okay. And it's like all the flavors just come together at the top of the palate. So we taste the back of our palate and the sides of our palate, right, on either side. And so we tend to taste bitter in the back. We tend to perceive salt up in the top. We tend to perceive acid or things that are tart on the side. But there is, to get to what I call the power of yum, which I mentioned, that involuntary spasm, the vocal delight, when you just take a bite of something, you go, yum, Everything's got to come together. And the way things come together with food is if they're balanced with 4 things: fat, acid, salt, and sweet. So I use the acronym FASS, F-A-S-S. So fat is like a little magic carpet that transverses the taste buds and it moves flavor back and forth, right? So it's just kind of like, ooh, it's like putting cashew cream on top of a soup. It's like, it's just gonna take maybe the flavors of that soup back and forth, right? It's like butter, right? Olive oil, any of those fats. Fat carries flavor, okay? Then there's acid. And acid is like lemons, limes, citrus, a little bit of vinegar. Those are like little animated characters that perk things up, that just bring the food alive, that bring brightness to the food. And then salt is super important because it takes food that's hanging out, the flavor that's hanging out of the back of the mouth, and brings it forward. It's like a little scrubbing bubble. It gets into the cellular membrane of this food and brings it alive. It's like, I don't know if you, the best example is if you have like a dish that's well balanced, but then you put it over a bed of rice that has not been seasoned. There's been no salt in the water. So it's just the blandest thing ever. So you put this, let's say this flavorful food on this bland rice, and the first thing you're going to taste is the bland rice, not the well-seasoned food. So our brain really is, very active about that. And then the fourth is sweet. And sweet is the first flavor we come into in the world. It's the first thing we perceive. Sweet is the first kind of flavor we perceive when we come into the world. And it's the last sense of flavor that we leave in the world. Why some people, at the end of life, they want something that's sweet, because that's the most acute flavor at the beginning and the end. But a little bit of sweet can round out a flavor. So you've got this little symphony of all these different things that can take what can be sort of a dish that's sort of on a scale of 1 on the yum factor, yum being a 10 and being a 1. And you can sort of be at a 5. Now, for somebody whose taste buds are operating at 80 or 90%, all right, if you had to eat at a 5 or a 6, you could do it, right? But if you are going through any kind of treatment, whether it's cancer treatment or antibiotics or certain medications or whatever, and your taste buds are not, like operating at 30%, that 5 or 6 on the yum factor is going to be a 1. And so you're not really going to want to eat. Again, it's like just what we were talking about, having too much food will turn off your appetite center. Food that doesn't have any taste to it, that will turn off your appetite center. So the goal is to try and balance out our food so that we can reach an optimum amount of taste. So we can get to that feeling of true nourishment, which comes from tasty foods. And so there are symptoms that sometimes can get in the way of our taste buds operating, and a lot of that is what I'm talking about is what kind of treatment we're dealing with. So, for example, some people have metallic tastes in their mouth because they're on certain medications. So how do we deal with that metallic taste? Well, water can taste super metallic if you're sensitive, right? And you're having this metallic taste. But if you put in a squeeze of lemon or lime or orange, that will mitigate that metallic taste. And if you have something that is too acidic, right? A little bit of honey or maple syrup, and I mean just a little bit, can totally negate that. And if something is tasting way too bland, then salt is the flavor carrier you really want to reach for. And if you feel like, you've got dry mouth or just things just aren't moving around your palate enough, then fat is what you need. So I was saying, it's like I could make you a beautiful carrot ginger soup, and it just might not be hitting on all cylinders, but I could put a dollop of cashew cream or a little pesto that had some oil in it, And that would take something that was like maybe a 5 and take it to a 9 or a 10. So that's how that's how taste can really play a big role in how we deal with symptoms and also how we feel nourished on a daily basis.
Ooh, I am learning so much. Thank you, Rebecca.
I could talk about this forever, but I know we're on a time crunch, so I'm trying to be like, I'm trying to parse it out.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
I think I'm realizing, Rebecca, I think you just went through this. Like you really just kind of
I did.
went through exactly, but I don't know if you have any other thoughts you want to add to this one. Maybe just talking about some of the side effects.
I'm going to just say this, right? I'm looking at the toast. I'm looking at the bread, right? So oftentimes when we're feeling really kind of meh, we want to go, like a go-to is toast, right? So sometimes toast can be like really texturally challenging. And this is a perfect example of how putting something creamy on your toast would make it more, would take something that would be just too grainy or too difficult and make it easier. And also toast can be a vehicle, right? To put something nutrient dense on it, like a nut butter or something that might give you the calories that you're seeking. So I'm just, I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the Royal Crown Cola and saying, okay, a food that could mitigate a side effect is making your own ginger ale with sparkling water and a little bit of ginger juice, which you can get in these jars now, and just a little bit of ginger juice and a spritz of lemon and frozen grapes. That could be, your ginger ale. That could be that spritzy cola-like thing that might help settle your stomach or just feel really good in your mouth.
Oh, where do I get the ginger juice? I'm so ready.
I was gonna say, I'm getting kind of hungry and like this is stimulating my appetite. Absolutely.
And ginger is an appetite stimulant. Okay.
Okay, but really, we can go where to find this ginger juice? So, okay, seltzer.
Oh, wait. I'm going to show you. Wait, I'm getting it.
Okay, straight from the kitchen of Rebecca Katz.
I'm in my kitchen. Okay. So, this is organic ginger juice by Edwards and Sons, but also you can get it from the ginger people. The ginger people make ginger juice, and they're the ones that make kind of like the ginger gummies and things like that. And you can literally just go onto Amazon and type in ginger juice and you will be able to get it. And now you can really find it in so many grocery stores. Back in the day, I would have to boil a lot of ginger, right? To kind of make, and then I'd have to reduce it, and that's how I would get ginger juice. But now, right in the jar. So,
okay, so
this is my homemade ginger ale. Yeah, just seltzer, a little bit of ginger juice. Like I would start with a half a teaspoon because ginger juice is really concentrated, and then a little squeeze of lemon, and you can put ice in it, or you can freeze some grapes, which is really a treat because they, especially if you're dealing with mouth issues or mouth sores or anything like that, you could just bite into a frozen grape. It's the greatest feeling ever. So highly recommend.
Okay, and you're saying that this fresh homemade ginger drink, ginger stimulates our appetite. Is that true?
Yes, it does. So ginger can be an appetite stimulant. It also helps with nausea and settling our stomachs, and but it also gets your digestive fire going. So it can stimulate your appetite and then make your food more digestible. So ginger is a great one.
Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, this is our last slide, and then we'll do questions and feedback.
Oh my God. I love this slide more than anything.
It's so cool. It's some artist in Europe somewhere, and they cut all these little perfect pieces of food. I just love it.
It's just this says it, Natalie, this says it all, right? This is like just again what we were talking about. Like this is at the end of life, this is where you are. You're just not going to handle a big anything, but you might have a craving, and just to have it in the smallest little morsel of yum that you can just take a little nibble of or hold it in your mouth or experience that feeling. This is like critical, because you may not be able to eat, or maybe you don't want to swallow, but you can really engage the taste buds and bring back these memories in these small little bites of yum. I mean, this talk about a picture, speaking 1,000 words, right? I mean, this really says it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such an honor when you can bring somebody something in just a small, it's like a token of a morsel of yum, a token of to honor their taste buds at this period of time, that something that can be held in the mouth, or just this is where we tie back to emotion and all of those things. But Natalie, you chime in on this. I'm like looking at
people, I think of all ages, sometimes there's this idea that treasures are little. And so to me, it's like a little treasure. And if it comes to you in a little treasure package, opening and seeing and what is revealed. And I think for each of us, I've picked out like the 4 that I would want to have. And so I think realizing that I'm getting such a sense of enjoyment looking and realizing if I could just have that little one, and then maybe that little one too, that there's something for each of us, and a little treasure, taste treasure.
Can I chime in with a quick thought that I was just thinking about as you were
Yes.
saying, Natalie, was the kind of like aesthetics of food. And Rebecca, you were talking about that earlier about just like putting down a huge plate in front of someone. But there's something like seeing the beauty of a small amount of food or something that's been beautifully prepared. I think that adds more specialness, or like it makes it more of a moment versus like I'm just eating to eat. And that I think can bring in the kind of like I'm living still and I'm still experiencing this type thing. So for me, there's definitely something still in that aesthetic realm of like I see this beautiful thing, it's small, and then I'm going to put it in my mouth and experience it that way too. I hadn't thought about it until right now when you were talking, Natalie.
Oh, Sonia, that is just pitch perfect. Natalie, wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
I'm going to stop sharing because we've got some questions that I want to go to. And I know we've just got, 12 minutes of time. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Oh my gosh, so much good information. Carolina, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, said, can you say something about nausea or vomiting and how we can still be nourished despite this? I'm sure that's a big problem for a lot of people.
Ooh, it's a tough one. That is a challenge. So Definitely ginger. Like, and this is really important. It's like smaller meals more frequently. Definitely ginger tea, ginger ale, anything in the ginger department. Um, things that tend to be, bland are important when you're nauseous and vomiting. I mean, it's like it's called the brat diet, but it's basically bland, and things like rice and things like applesauce and things like toast or like banana. So brat really, but small amounts. It's a big challenge. I mean, I wish I could say there was like one magic bullet, but what I would say is hydration is the most important thing. And it might not be what you eat so much as how you can keep yourself hydrated during those times. Wish I could offer more than that.
Rebecca, in terms of hydration, you talked about water and what we can do in terms of adding some lime or lemon or orange. What is your take in terms of concerns around hydration and these hydration packets that we can add to our water?
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's important, especially if you're nauseous and vomiting, that you add electrolytes. And there are really good products out there that you can add to your water or add to a juice or add that's gonna, especially when you're nauseous and you're vomiting and you're going through that. Super important, because if you were to just drink water alone without the electrolytes, it wouldn't really do what I call stopping and talking to all the cells along the way and plumping them up. You do need potassium and sodium. So yeah, I'm a fan. Look at the labels. They're really good ones and they're really not such good ones, but I think there are more good ones out there now than ever before.
We've got a hand up, Rebecca. You may have to unmute yourself on your end. Another
Hi,
Rebecca.
hi, Natalie. And Rebecca. Your wisdom, Rebecca, and this conversation has sparked so many aha moments for me. And it just struck me after Sonia said what she did about food being an aesthetic thing. It really, nurturing someone with food falls into the same Mettle method aesthetics umbrella. And we didn't talk about that during our training. And I thought, why didn't we? Because food and the act of eating and the ritual of enjoying a meal is such a huge part of life for most people. And this just adds like one more little gem to a way of bringing aesthetics into the lives of people who are suffering. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I also just wanted to comment on the, Natalie, your feeling that I need you to eat this because it's going to make me feel better. I think that's how we really deal with people who are in their last stages of life, because it's all about control and it's all about us and perception. And if my mother is eating with her hands, that's perfectly okay. But for my sister, it's not, because it's embarrassing and it's all about her. when the focus should not be on the caregiver, it should be on the care receiver. And as I think Sonia said, just meeting that patient where they are in the moment. And I think, Rebecca, you've just given me this whole other fuel to think about palliative care with. And I thank you. Thank you. This was an amazing, amazing conversation.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And you have a
Good to-
great name, by the way.
I know. I was going to say.
It was good to hear
Rebecca,
from Rebecca.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate it.
Mm.
Let's see if we got any other questions. I'm thinking about like my own experience when my mom was dying, and we didn't have this, so we were giving her food that we thought she would want, and it was left. And again, for us, that felt like, to just continue the point of what Rebecca's saying and what Natalie said, that we had failed, that this was something like that. The not eating, I feel like, is a real emotional, trigger is the wrong word, a moment. That moment when people stop eating, I think, is really hard for us, the people watching, because I think it signifies something that is pretty terrifying and scary, and it kind of pushes home a reality that you're about to deal with. So I just remember for ourselves, it was hard. It was hard to be like, okay, we're at this stage, and like food is not going to be a thing anymore, and maybe it's just tending to the health of her mouth. I don't know, Rebecca, if you want to talk about that at all in our last few moments here.
Oh, yeah. I have something to say about that. First of all, I'm with you. I dealt with this with my mother, and her caregivers were just, they had trouble wrapping their heads around that she wasn't going to eat anymore. And the focus really was, Sonia, to your point, dealing with her mouth and keeping it moist. And that's where, there are these wonderful like sponge swabs that you can dip in like a liquid that's flavored. Again, I kind of experimented with lots of different little flavored liquids, and just that were cool, and just swabbed the interior part of her cavity and her lips, and just and had her suck on the liquid. And that's another way to just keep the mouth moist, but also to just deliver just a sense of a flavor, a sense of feeling present, right? So, or some sort of connection. Like, I'm not going to eat because I don't want to eat. I can't swallow. That's not in the cards right now. But that tending to the mouth can be a lovely ritual, actually. I mean, I know that's hard. I mean, I know that's hard to say. It is, as in the final days when I was dealing with my mother's passing, that was a way that I could make her feel comfortable. So again, these little sponges, and I just experimented with different flavors that I thought that she might like, and kept it cool, very cool.
Right. So refreshing, which is a lovely
sensation. Refreshing. Right.
I want to go to there's kind of a comment from a Sonia. We've got a Rebecca and a Sonia in here with us. Sonia, excuse me, had a little bit about her experience, but what I want to pull out is, we were so fortunate that the home palliative nurse who oriented us to mom's care answered our questions about food with, "You should just eat what you love and can tolerate. Just enjoy." it was all a great bit of guidance. Food and fun made our final months together awesome. So I think that's something that happens a lot too, is, oh, you can't eat that. That's, you know, that's, and kind of giving permission to throw that rule out the window. I don't know if you want to touch on that in the last few minutes here.
Okay, I'm just going to say, there are no rules. There is no, you should, anything. It's like that train, that train is gone. That plane has taken off. It is truly what is going to bring you joy. That is the only thing that matters. That is the most healing thing ever, right? I don't care if it's a bite of a bacon cheeseburger from, you know, Burger King. There is no judgment. It can be a real relief if you can let go and just participate in honoring that. And then you can really, then it really becomes something else. So yes, the greatest advice ever, embrace it.
And I'll also name that while embracing, suddenly our loved one is going to eat cinnamon rolls at every turn, and that's all that they're going to be eating, that our ritual of sitting down together has now ended, that we're just doing mouth swabbing, that while there can be this release or relief, or when I rant about, you know, modify, I also at the same time want to name, while we modify, that very likely there's a grieving process that goes along with the fact that we are modifying instead of focusing on rehabilitation. So I wanted to add to your sentiment, Rebecca, around naming truth and all of this, that there can be a truth with that. We're sitting with the grief of it, as Sonia spoke about, this means something. And so that likely grief is coming up, and that there is another part of where can we find some beauty, connection, sustained joy and connection while being in grief and sitting in that multidimensional experience.
Beautifully said, Natalie. I'm so glad that you said that.
We are at the hour. Thank you so much, both of you. Rebecca, so much beautiful, helpful information. And I will make sure to put some of what you talked about into the email that goes out to everyone so they can find you and, you know, learn from your website. Rebecca's got lots of helpful stuff out there in the world. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Natalie. I kind of feel like we should all go eat something amazing and delicious that has an emotional component for us today. Like that's what I want to go to. So I'm wishing a beautiful, gorgeous pocket of yum for everyone out there. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Happy weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.